All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. Time for some Wednesday wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen, because we are diving further into our series of the Hermetica and the Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs. And this has just been a fascinating series so far, ladies and gentlemen. Last time, on last week's Wednesday episode, we literally read the section titled The Wisdom of the Pharaohs, which talked about the hieroglyphs themselves related to the Hermetic philosophy, and how these hieroglyphs were over 5,000 years old, containing doctrines identical to those expounded in the Hermetica. And so we found a deeper importance, a deeper meaning, and a deeper understanding into the history of the Hermetica. And I called last week's video a connection between Atlantis, Plato, Pythagoras. It's very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. But the last section ended with the similarities between the works of Plato, which came from Pythagoras. Plato learned from the Greek sage Pythagoras. Pythagoras learned from being initiated and spending 22 years in the religion or the mystery, the mystical, spiritual traditions of the Egyptians. Later, Plato studies and learns. It says here he purchased 3 books of Pythagorean doctrines based on the Egyptian wisdom that Pythagoras learned in his time there. And these he adapted into the Timaeus, the Platonic philosophy. The similarities between the works of Plato and the Hermetica are not surprising, therefore, since many of Plato's ideas were direct descendants of the ancient Egyptian philosophy, the wisdom of the pharaohs, the wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen, which I believe came from and has survived from the previous golden age. And so today we find ourselves on the section titled The Hermetica and Early Christianity. Fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see where this goes. Once again, this is the Hermetica Tarsier Cornerstone edition, The Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs, written by Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy. And so what we're going through right now is an introduction, excuse me, talking about the history of the Hermetica and the importance. What is it and why is it so important? Well, if you've missed any of our previous videos, ladies and gentlemen, I will say everywhere that this wisdom tradition, along with the Platonic philosophy or the wisdom of Pythagoras, but that came from this, wisdom tradition anyways, from Egypt, I think came back from before that in the previous golden age, all the way up into Atlantis and now. But the reason this is so important is because everywhere it goes throughout history, it is responsible, or at least influences, the greatest times and the greatest minds throughout history. Whether it be the city of Alexandria, the universal city, the Greeks called it, in which had women and men of every race and nation, and living together and associated in relative peace. It's very fascinating. And then after that, it was responsible for what was the first university established in Baghdad, called the House of Wisdom, probably a very mystical, spiritual university, because it says here many pagan works were translated. And the sciences that had reached such heights in Alexandria were significantly developed. And the ancient spiritual wisdom of the ages, all that, was significantly developed, covertly studied, and practiced. From its exalted position among the sacred scriptures of ancient Egyptian spirituality, the Hermetica became the secret inspiration for many of Eastern religions such as Islam and the Sabaeans. And so, once again, it finds itself having an impact in Florence, Italy, sometime around 1440 or 1460. A man by the name of Cosimo de' Medici established a new Platonic and Hermetic academy, giving birth to the emergence of a glorious new culture in Florence, signaling the end of the Dark Ages, this period we know so well as the Renaissance, or the Renaissance, meaning rebirth, ladies and gentlemen. And at the undercurrent of the Hermetic philosophy is the idea of a spiritual rebirth. And so we come to now understanding its importance and influence on great times throughout history. Maybe let's give a point to great minds throughout history, if we can. I'm not finding it here right off the top, but it has a list of all of these greatest minds, the greatest scientists: Leonardo da Vinci and Botticelli, Raphael, even up to Copernicus. And here we go. It profoundly influenced the great names like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli, Raphael, who began painting pictures of the ancient pagan gods. And so it influenced great minds. And here's the bit about the spirit of the ancient paganism. So Brunelleschi and the astronomer Toscanelli, whose famous map inspired Columbus, all owed their inspiration to the Florentine reawakening of the spirit of ancient paganism. Now we know all of these maps are very interesting subjects today, and much of it is where it should be, in a realm of up for debate, open for question. And that's when the greatest times were, is when science and spirituality were open for debate. And there was a time when we could discuss things without having too much compartmentalization. Ladies and gentlemen, on the first page on the revolution of the celestial orbs, published in 1543, Copernicus quotes the words of the thrice great Hermes, or Thoth, which is where this Hermetica, or this wisdom, comes from in our age, in our era. He quotes in his book on the revolution of celestial orbs, the sun is the visible God. So we come now to our section of today, ladies and gentlemen, which is titled The Hermetica and Early Christianity. It begins by saying, quote, Hermetic philosophy also influenced Christianity through the Alexandrian Church Fathers, Saint Clement and Saint Origen, Origen, who synthesized pagan and Christian religious doctrines. Fascinating. So it is due to such theologians that the Hermetic concept of the word, quote unquote, is found in the opening verse of the Gospel of John. Wow. Wow, ladies and gentlemen. See, we're learning things right away. That is fascinating. Right there. That so Hermetic philosophy influenced Christianity through the Alexandrian Church Fathers, St. Clement and St. Origen, who synthesized pagan and Christian religious doctrines. So figured out connections between these, synthesized them, and is due to such gentlemen as these doing the synthesizing of pagan and Christian religions, which is what our previous chapter was about, was the, or actually two ago, which was the unifying religion, this idea that there could be a connection between each of the Judeo-Christian religions, or the great three, Judaism, Catholicism, which later became the many forms of Christianity, and as well Islam. And there was a gentleman with this wisdom from the ages, this wisdom of the Pharaohs that goes back a very long time, had the idea that this could allow and connect and, end so many years of fighting and bloodshed amongst the different religions. Which, wouldn't that be a wonderful idea? But here later, he says, it is due, Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy, whichever one was writing this section, it is due to such theologians that the Hermetic concept of, quote unquote, the Word, remember, the Word was God, and the Word, there was all this connection between God and the Word. And so this concept of the Word is found in the opening verse of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. So Hermes and Thoth was known, Hermes/Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, was known to the ancients as the scribe of the gods and master of the Word. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, what it said about the importance of the Word. This isn't the right one. I wish I could find that. I said it last week. But it talks about how the Egyptian language has a resonance with the sounding of the word that has the meaning of it as well. I wish I could find that for you here right now, because that was so powerful. But that we spoke about that in previous episodes. So if you've missed any previous episodes, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to go to the channel and check out the playlist, which I have linked at the end of this video. And we're getting pretty deep into it now. I think we're already 10 episodes in or something. But so the frequency and the power of the original language that it was spoken, and then being related to the creative power, because we're going to do a series on this in the future, that the creative power of or the creative power, of sound and frequency, ladies and gentlemen. And so here it's talking about the Word. And when you think of ancient religion, ancient Egyptian religion, the creator God, sun god, Ra, or Amun-Ra, and when you think of certain Christian traditions that say Amen, let it be so, or, let it be so, meaning to me, may it be created, or, something in that terms. It's a creationary aspect. When you're speaking something into existence and then blessing it with an amen, or, saying, let this be so. And the connection there between Amun, Ra. And so it's all very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. It's all connected in these ideas of sound frequencies and certain words and abilities of creation. The Word coming to us even in the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And it continues on. But Hermes and Thoth was known to the ancients as the scribe of the gods and the master of the Word, the master of creation, I might ask, or the master of the knowledge of manifesting, or the ability to use elements in reality to create, the master of this special concept of the Word. But that was my ramblings. If you're getting value, consider subscribing, ladies and gentlemen. If you're already subscribed, leave me a comment below. I love interacting with you in the chat. And it's so great to see who actually watches these videos, because this is powerful philosophy, ladies and gentlemen. Philosophy. In Christianity, it continues the book here. Jesus Christ, who is also the Son of God. See, we're just talking about the Son, God. Very fascinating. We were learning last time, looking at the cycles, around how different times people worshipped Venus or the moon or Saturn or the sun, and the idea or the understanding of the possibility that Saturn may have been a previous sun and Venus a captured comet. But there's many things to think about. And so God utters in the Hermetica. See, so we're thinking about the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. And so let's take a look at that and compare real quickly. So this is how you have to research to discover and expand on possibilities, because all of this is fascinating and it's interesting and open for questions. So here's a tool you can use, BibleHub.com. I used this back in the early beginning of my channel, learned this from Jeff. You know who we're talking about, then a shout out. And so check this out. Just simply, I mean, here's a bunch of different versions, as if you don't know that already, that there's a bunch of different versions of the ideas and understandings of what was actually said in these now later translations, because you have the Greek and the Hebrew for the Old Testament, the Greek for the New Testament. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have up here what is the interlin, or the interlinear, Greek and Hebrew interlinear. But what we were just saying here, we're talking about the Word and the power of creation. I guess I had no idea this is where this was going to go, but the Word is found in the opening verse of the Gospel of John here. Hermes and Thoth was known to be the master of this aspect of the Word, which is what these Alexandrian church fathers, these older theologians that synthesized the pagan and Christian doctrines out of the Hermetic concept of the Word. And so, in the Hermetica, God utters a word which calms the chaotic waters of creation. Do you remember, ladies and gentlemen, when we did our first video about Genesis 1:1, it said, in the Bible, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, if you go to the interlinear here, it is fascinating. Let's go. Remember that term, the water? Right here. Genesis 1:2. Created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness. What was this term, darkness? This term darkness means obscurity. Obscurity, ladies and gentlemen. So the earth was formless, void, and obscure. And the Spirit of God, which translates to the breath or the wind. Ooh, if you've been watching Jeff lately, the breath or the wind, brought that one up recently too, was hovering over the face of the waters. So here we have that same situation, flood, pool, waters. That's weird that waterless is related to that. But so it was hovering. This makes it even funnier, actually. Hovering means to relax. So it was relaxing. That's funny. It says to grow soft or to relax. And so the wind, or the breath of Elohim, was relaxing over the face of the flood or the waters. So that's even fascinating that that connects right there to what it was just saying. In the Hermetica, God utters a word which calms the chaotic waters of creation. And so the connection of relaxing right there over the waters and God doing it. God being divine, divinity. Gods, goddesses, judges. So it's interesting the difference between the gods and then the universal force, or the Tao that we talk about so often, the Atum, which is referenced here in the Hermetic traditions. But now let's go back to where we were going, because see, we're making connections, we're learning here. This is why this is good, ladies and gentlemen. Get rid of these advertisements. Now, we're going to John chapter 1 here. And so we'll go back to just a normal version here. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Isn't that fascinating? And so the Word was God, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's take that to the interlinear and find out what things actually mean. What is this word that we're talking about? What is the translation? This is Strong's Greek translation, number 3056 here. And then it brings over here the Englishman's Concordance and references to the Greek usage of this word, the original word, logos, as embodying an idea, a statement, speech, a word, logos, divine utterance, ladies and gentlemen, an analogy. Fascinating. Ooh, a word being the expression of a thought. And what is creation, ladies and gentlemen, but the expansion of our thoughts into reality? So, this is very fascinating that just the word itself here, logos, gets us into the idea. Anyways, so let's continue this short little bit here. I've been extrapolating quite a bit. This is fun, ladies and gentlemen, and this is how you learn. You have to look at the meaning of the words. You don't just say, yeah, in the beginning was the word. Well, what the heck? In the beginning, what was the beginning? That's fascinating. It's talking about birthing pains here. Very fascinating. We don't get a bunch of explanation for this word, but that's first. I haven't seen many that don't have. Let's click 746. There we go. A rule. The origin of a rule, kingly or magisterial, plural, in a quasi-personal sense, almost rulers or magistres. So once again, we get that plural going back to the Elohim in the beginning. And this word beginning being connected to that. Properly from the beginning temporal sense. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we're just checking things out here. And so the word was with God. See, this one, I don't believe. Yeah, theos. See, this is not the Elohim. This is something else. God, a God, generally. So this must be the lower level, the less divine. So this isn't the Tao, but this is the lower level gods that we hear about through all the pagan stories or the wonderful stories of the ancient times. And so we're beginning to see that you can see the word God used twice here in the scripture, and it means different things. You find that one is Elohim, one is Theos, and Theon being a plural version of Theos, I'm guessing. Once again, a god generally. This is very fascinating. Now, let's go back to what was being said here in the book. The word is even called the Son of God. So in the Hermetica, God utters a word which calms the chaotic waters of creation, ladies and gentlemen. And so we've seen the correlations there. The word is even called, quote, the Son of God in Christianity. Jesus Christ, who is also called the Son of God. Okay, so we're talking about the Son and then being switched into the Son of God, S-U-N versus S-O-N. And so this quote-unquote Son of God is identified as an embodiment of the power of the quote word. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, this is deep. So St. Augustine of Hippo, the influential 4th century theologian who was familiar with the works of Hermes, writes this, quote, that which is called the Christian religion existed among the ancients and never did not exist from the beginning of the human race until Christ came into the flesh, at which time the true religion, which already existed, began to be called Christianity. That's fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. It makes you wonder if, if that's how destiny worked. There's supposed to be a character, a wise master, an individual. We don't know if it was Jesus because Rome used that, you know, tactically against the pagan traditions that this wisdom tradition already existed amongst. And so, but if there was a wise master that had the great wisdom and brought together many groups of pagan wisdom traditions and kind of tried to amalgamate it for a good purpose, and then it got hijacked and allowed the takeover of many of these great, I don't like to call them pagan because they were just the spiritual traditions against the, church at the time, but that was spread out amongst these great. It's fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. It's deep. Let us continue. The influence of the Hermetica on early Christianity is beyond doubt. In 1945, the works of Hermes were discussed and discovered amongst scriptures belonging to Gnostic Christians of the 1st century CE. So you'd have to have an understanding of Gnostic philosophies. But so works of Hermes were discovered, this is 1945, so we're way into the future now, we're like modern times. Discovered amongst the scriptures belonging to Gnostic Christians of the 1st century CE. According to a note on one of the texts from the 1st century, it's fascinating. Early Christian communities possessed many copies of the works of Hermes. So it seems to me that the correlation here is that having the willingness or the openness to study multiple spiritual traditions, mystical traditions of many different groups, and try to find the correlations in all of them because the wisdom is there, the hidden wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen. So, fascinating. And so these early Christian communities possessed many copies of the works of Hermes, just a few yards. So we're beginning to see how much influence this Hermetic wisdom tradition had not only in the Greek culture, which we found out last week, but has now had in early Christianity. In so much that St. Augustine, in his retractions, stated that the Christian religion never really existed, or, well, never really, this is the way he said it, that which is called the Christian religion existed among the ancients and never really did not exist. So even before, quote unquote, Christianity exists, this wisdom of the ages was already there, that then later got, orthodized or created into a hierarchy and a structure of orthodoxy by the Holy Roman Empire and different orthodoxies into their own systems that began to be very dogmatic and not very open-minded to the ancient pagan traditions in which they find their beginnings in. And so, this is incredible, ladies and gentlemen. This is really deep. Just a few yards from the place where these scriptures were found are ancient Egyptian tombs. So, according to a note on the early text, early Christian communities possessed copies of these works of Hermes, and just a few yards from the place where these scriptures were found, ancient Egyptian tombs were there. These are inhabited by early Christian hermits such as Saint Pachomius, the father of the first Christian monastic communities. Very interesting. Monastic, I believe. Let's find out, because if you don't know a word, it's important to know the meaning of a word, ladies. Okay, so here we go. Monastic, ladies and gentlemen, as you guessed, relating to monks or others living under religious vows or the buildings in which they live a monastic order. So, now knowing what we're seeing here, see, it's important. I felt it important to point that out because sometimes we go over things and we think, yeah, we just know what that means, but it helps to understand thoroughly. So, the founder of the first Christian monastic communities, the walls of these tombs are covered, wow, because they were inhabiting these ancient Egyptian tombs. So the walls of these tombs are covered in hieroglyphs ascribed to the great god Thoth, Tahat, Hermes. And remember that sound ah in God and Thoth, Tahat, Ra, Krishna, Buddha, even Viracocha. There's lots of different creative gods that have this sound ah. And I think, like we'll talk about in the future when I can figure out how to organize those thoughts, there's a connection between the sound ah and the power of creation, or the harmonics and the frequencies of ah, or, a certain pronunciation of ah that is connected to what we were just talking about earlier, the word, this power of creation. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it wasn't the theos, like we've seen, just the general gods. It was the divine. And so, this is, if you're getting value, smash the like button, leave me a comment, and let me know what you think about this. It's fascinating. They describe a spiritual rebirth. So these hieroglyphs describe to the great god Thoth, Tahat, Hermes Trismegistus, as we know him, in this Hermetic philosophy. They describe these hieroglyphs in these tombs of the first Christian monastic societies, a spiritual rebirth into knowledge of God, or the Tao, or the force, or the source, or the divine grand organizing design, ladies and gentlemen. Fascinating. A knowledge of God, and maybe a knowledge of the word, and a knowledge of Atum, and the utterance, and the creative power, and all the things that fall into the categories of, mystical sciences and the mystery schools. And so, in such places, these tombs, or these gathering places of the early Christian monastic communities, they composed their own philosophy. They poured over the Hermetica. In such places, early Gnostic Christians poured over the Hermetica. Under its powerful influence, they composed their own philosophy of a saving gnosis, Greek for knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. And there, like we've seen in our research a little bit ago, let's see if we can find gnosis here. Whoops. Let's see what pops up. We can get an interlineal. There's one. Greek gnosis. A knowing. A knowing. See? Funny. Let's click that. So here is, let me share the screen for you, ladies and gentlemen, so you can research along with me. I just got scared. I thought I ended the video. But here we have gnosis, the knowledge of salvation. Oh, so that's what we were just talking about. The key of knowledge, you yourselves. What I thought about was knowing yourself. And so the embodiment of knowledge and the truth. Fascinating. The feminine noun. A knowing, a knowledge. Doctrine, wisdom. What are we talking about here on Wednesdays, ladies and gentlemen? Wednesday wisdom. The wisdom of the ages. And we are discovering the gnosis, or the wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. Applied knowledge. Fascinating. So that gives us a little bit more into what we're understanding here. And you can always get deeper understandings from the translations. And so a direct knowledge So this is what they were getting here. These early Gnostic Christians pored over the Hermetica. Under its powerful influence, they composed their own philosophy of this idea of a saving gnosis, or a saving knowledge, an understanding of reality in the universe, I'm adding. The understanding of creation and the power of creation and how you can have an influence on creating your life and influencing, hopefully for the positive. That's where you get the force. It can be used by the dark side or the light side. It's just a tool. So we stand with the light and defend. Anyways, that's a different story. But it's like this gnosis, under its powerful influence, of a saving knowledge, a wisdom, a direct knowledge of God, of the force, which is what we've been discovering here on Wednesday Wisdom and Tuesday Tao for the whole lifetime of this channel, and every other video I've done just about is about discovering this thing, whether it be the science of lucky people manifesting or philosophy and psychology, a direct knowledge of this saving wisdom of God bestowed to them by the Messiah Jesus. But we know, if we compare to many other wisdom traditions, that there's always this character that has a unique correlation to being the Son of God and certain birth times and certain, being a savior of a sort. And so archetypes, ladies and gentlemen, archetypes, because they were talking about a saving gnosis, a saving wisdom, a saving knowledge bestowed by a great teacher. In the evidence, the book continues, all the evidence suggests that Casaubon was wrong to simply dismiss the Hermetica, as we've discussed in the last few of our episodes. And so, as some cobbled together mixture of many different philosophies, is what he thought the Hermetica was. Before, many hundred years after his death, we discovered out the origin of these hieroglyphs and translated their meaning. The Hermetica was undoubtedly written by Alexandrian scholars for a Greek-speaking readership, but it contains a powerful echo of the ancient wisdom on which it was based. It offers us one of the best windows available to gaze into Egypt's remotest past. With its help, we can understand the mystical vision that inspired the awesome Giza pyramids in Plateau. But what is the Hermetic philosophy that has held such a profound fascination and all that influence on the greatest times and minds throughout history? Oh, that's what it said, for some of the greatest minds in history. The Hermetic philosophy that has held such a profound fascination for some of the greatest minds in history, ladies and gentlemen. Boom! And that is a boom to wisdom, a boom to the wisdom of the ages. We did a little more screen shares, a little more studying here today, ladies and gentlemen. I had no idea that it would go that direction. And I have no idea what I'll actually title this video, An Introduction to the History of the Hermetica in Early Christianity and Creation, or the Power of Creation, something like that. Fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. And guess what? Next week, we're going to have the meaning, or simply put, the mind of God is what that subject is about. Next section. It says here to begin, just to give you a teaser for what we'll go into next Wednesday. So you want to be ready, ladies and gentlemen. I usually produce these videos about the same time. If we don't have any wacky, wild mess ups with the uploading process like last week, but it begins here, our next section, which is here's the teaser. At the heart of Hermes' teachings, the teachings of Tahath, or thought, is one simple idea, that God is a big mind. A big mind. The big mind, ladies and gentlemen. Everything which exists is a thought, or sounds close to thought, within the mind of God. This ought to be fascinating because it goes much deeper than that. And this is when we begin discovering parts of the philosophy of Hermes or Thoth himself, or itself. Fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic. And so, if you'd like to get that book for yourself, to put it on your bookshelf so you can have it for reference in the future, if, sometimes you might feel a calling and say, that's seems important. And then sometimes there may be, it's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And it's like the teachers are always there, but sometimes it just takes till you are ready, and then you can receive it. So, sometimes you'll read something, and it just doesn't, it seems important, but it's just like you're not ready for it. And then you'll see it sitting there a couple years later and go, yes. And then you're engrossed in it and taking in every bit. And so, anyways, expand the description below the video where it says more under the description box. And you can expand that and find a link to the book so you can get it for yourself to put it on your shelf, as well as a link to my Etsy shop with my landscape paintings and C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man. Don't underestimate it, ladies and gentlemen. Give yourself the gift of health. C60. Boom. If you've never heard of C60, at least just do a Google and you'll see that, wow, there's a lot that, the more that you know, the more that you find that you didn't know, which is a good one. So let's continue, ladies and gentlemen. Seeking to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, a greater awareness, and a greater understanding of the reality we find ourselves in, the mysteries of our reality, and seek to discover the wisdom of the ages. And remember also, ladies and gentlemen, to make happiness the way, the process that we bring to life, because when happiness is the way, then the things that we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I get there, but I can't be now, that becomes irrelevant because we're already there. And then the entire journey is wonderful, hopefully, ladies and gentlemen. It's a practice. It's an art, and it's a skill. It makes me think of these wise, sages and masters. And they were like samurais, or, they had an incredible ability of a mental and spiritual sort, not so much physical. But, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I love and appreciate all of you. Once again, if you have not subscribed, consider subscribing, because we'll be doing this often. And check out the previous videos and the playlists. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I love and appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for watching.